So welcome everybody to this session on ordering and activating electronic collections from the community zone. This is part of our ongoing series here, the Managing Electronic Resources 10-part series, which you see on my screen here. This is our second session. Last week we had a general overview and background. You already have the recording available here. Link on this page to the recording of each session, by the way, if there's one particular session you prefer, as well as the materials we used. And now we're on ERM 102 for ordering and activating collections. After this session ends, we will put the recording here. You've got the slides right here. We're going to look briefly at the slides today, but you've got a link here to the slides. And what we'll be covering today is the ordering and activation workflow, ordering an electronic collection and activating it. We're going to do an example for a one-time collection and one for a subscription or a continuous. We'll talk about what the differences are there, and then activating the collection. So everything is on this page. In case for whatever reason somebody does not have this page, I will send a link out in the chat right now. And now everybody has the page. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Very briefly, we're going to look at this PowerPoint presentation just to get an overview of what we're doing here, a high level. Then we're going to go into Alma and Primo, time permitting, Primo also, but I think we'll have time, and see the results of our activated electronic collection. So in general, we're going to look at the introduction, the steps, and then we're going to order and activate and see the whole process for both the one-time and for the subscription. So what are the steps? Let's just briefly look at the steps, then we're going to go into Alma. We're going to have a bibliographic record or bibliographic records, but the electronic collection itself contains a bibliographic record. Then we're going to find that in the community zone according to the electronic collection name. We're going to confirm that we don't already have it in our institution, and then we're going to order it, and then we're going to activate it. So let's go into Alma and begin. So I'll make this a little bit larger so it'll look nice in the video. And let's say now I'm looking for an electronic collection, okay? And I'm going to look for one called ProQuest Historical Newspapers, The Commercial Appeal. That's my electronic collection. And I'm going to search for it for starters in the institution. I have two scopes here, institution and community. Those of you who are members of a network zone consortia will have a third option there, which is to search the network zone. So I'm searching my institution, and I see I don't have it. So I'm going to search the community zone, and I can switch to searching the community zone either by choosing this scope here, or from my results, simply switching to a different tab, in this case, the tab called Community. So now I've got the community zone results, and I see that we do have this. I know we have it in the community zone, and I see from here that I don't have it in my institution, because if I did, I would see an icon here on the left, and we're going to see that icon afterwards. So I know I don't have it, and now I can either directly activate it here, or I can first order it and then activate it. So I'm going to begin by ordering this one, and then we're going to activate it. And this is going to be a one-time. Now, when I say one-time, I mean we order it, we have it, it doesn't require a renewal, it's not a subscription. And that is done, that is known or done by communications with the vendor, but typically it's pretty clear when it's, for example, e-journals, it's typically something that needs to be renewed. Otherwise, typically it's a one-time, but that's already between you and the vendor. So I clicked order, and now I'll choose the purchase order line type. Let's look at the recommended. So the electronic collection one time is one of the recommended. I'll choose electronic collection one time. Every purchase order line, also for physical, for anything, needs a library. So I'll choose a library. And I could load from a template, but I'm not going to choose a template today so that we see the filling in of the various parts of the purchase order line together. So let's say create purchase order line. And now we're creating the purchase order line for this electronic collection, ProQuest Historical Newspapers, the commercial appeal. And here I've got my purchase order line. This is the new purchase order line interface. And the material type by default is going to book package because it's looking at the material types of what's in the portfolios that are in that electronic collection. It's giving that as a default. I could change it, but I'm going to leave it that way. It's going to be purchase. We're not going to go through all the purchase methods, but they appear in the online help. It's not within our scope now to talk about the different purchase methods. Suffice to say now it's going to be purchase. And I'm not going to do the manual packaging. I'm going to leave everything as it is here in the purchase order line information section. In the ordered collection section, we see the electronic collection that we just ordered, and we see that it's not yet active. And now we'll choose a material supplier. So I have a material supplier called ProQuest LLC. We'll choose that material supplier. Now, it's possible also to have an access provider. There are cases where the electronic collection is purchased from one vendor and the organization which is giving the actual access may be a different vendor, which is called an access provider. And here, for example, if I start looking for ProQuest, I can just start typing. So here I've got the access provider. Those are types of vendors. And then things here are going to get filled in automatically. The expected activation days after ordering, which now I have here 30. That gets filled in automatically from the defaults of the vendor. And we can take a look at that vendor afterwards and see. But suffice to say now, it appears here 30. When we go look at this vendor later, we'll see why it states here 30. Then we need to give it a price. So let's give it a price of €1,000. After we give it a price, we can add a fund. So we'll choose a fund here. And I'll choose this education fund. Now, the reason I need a fund, by the way, is because my acquisition method is purchase. Purchase requires a fund. If it was exchange or gift, for example, I wouldn't need a fund. Purchase, I need a fund. I could also give it a license here. I have a license called ProQuest. We'll give it a license. An activation note. We'll see later where this activation note will appear. I'm going to give an activation note, for example, make sure to check for access from off campus. And we'll see later where that appears. Interested users and reporting codes, we're not going to get into right now for our purposes. So we're all ready to go here. Let's take a look here that we've got everything we need. I'm going to click save here on the fund. On the fund, we need to click save. And that should do it. So now we'll say order now. Order now will send the order as the name suggests. Now, if we do save and continue, it will go into the packaging process where there's a job at night that runs and packages the purchase order line into a purchase order. Now we're going to leave it the way it is and say order now. And we're about to send this order. I'm just going to take the purchase order line number with me in case we want to check that later. And we're sending that off. So now the purchase order line has been submitted. When we say submitted, it means it's been submitted into a job to package it into a purchase order. Meanwhile, let's go take a look at this vendor. I'm just clicking the vendor here because we saw those 30 days before. So this is my vendor. This is the account we used. And if we look at this account, here's where we can make different defaults if we wanted. It's defaults to 30 if we don't have, but I could say here that I want it to be 60. In fact, I'm going to change it now. Let's make it 50. And then on our next order, we'll see it be 50. Expected activation after order. We're changing this to 50. And that's all we need right now. Okay, save. So now let's take a look at our order. We'll go to the purchase order lines, and let's see what's happening with that purchase order line. And it is now already sent, as we see here. It went into a purchase order and it's sent. So now it's sent, but it's not yet activated. I'm going to stop for a moment and go look at the chat just to see if anything came in. Let's see what's happening here. 171 participants. Very nice. Let's see. Anyone have a question or comment? Feel free to send in the chat if you have a question or comment. I don't see any questions or comments, so I'll just ask kindly, someone just send in if you still hear me all right. I always get a little concerned when there's no questions or comments. Okay, people are saying they hear me. All right, so if there's no questions or comments, let's go on. So if we go now and look for that same electronic collection in the community zone, that electronic collection was the ProQuest historical newspapers. I'm looking in the community zone. Now we're going to see that icon, which we were talking about a moment ago. Here's this icon. It looks like a house. And if I click that, first of all, it's gray. That means it's not active. It means I have it in my institution, but it's not active. And if I click it, then I go to the institution tab, and now I see the house icon, meaning I have it linked from the community zone, and it's gray, meaning it's not yet activated. Now let's go take a look at the activation process, because we see here it's not active. We know that by the color here, that it's gray. So when we created the order, automatically it created an electronic resource activation task. There's a task list. I'm going to click the little check mark on the top. There's a task list for electronic resource activation, which I can get to here. Here we have activation assigned to you, past the date, etc. And we can also get to this task list via resources, manage inventory, manage electronic resource activation. So let's go there and see what's happening. So by default, it's going to be in the unassigned tab. I'm going to click here, the unassigned tab. And here it is. That's the ProQuest historical newspapers. And here's our activation note. A moment ago, when I put this activation note in the purchase order line, I said, later we'll go see where that appears. Now we're seeing where it appears. It says, make sure to check for access from off campus. Now we can do various things here. I click those three dots. The action items is the official name. And now we can do various things. I can activate it. I can assign it to someone else. I can say done, which means it's no longer going to be in this electronic resource activation task list. I'm going to say activate. Let's see if we get any messages. And no messages. We simply get what's called the wizard, the activation wizard, as it states on top. There's many places in Alma where you begin a process, you get a wizard to help fill out things along the way. So it's got the name ProQuest Historical Newspapers. I could put in a different override name, but I'm not going to do that. By default, when these first get created, the bib record is suppressed. And the reason the bib record is suppressed is because you may not want it to be published until it's active. I'm going to unsuppress that. Electronic collection proxy enabled, that's your own business, however you normally handle your activations and your access. I'm not going to use a proxy here for my purposes. I'm saying we subscribe to only some titles in this collection. No, that means if you remember from last week, we talked about you can selectively choose certain portfolios from a collection or take them all. We're going to take them all, and we're going to say here, activate the electronic collection service. The service is going to be full text. We're going to say make it available and automatically activate new portfolios. That means anytime a portfolio will be added to this electronic collection by the vendor, it will automatically be activated. The active from date and to date, we're not going to deal with that. If it's not filled in, then it's active all the time. But I might want to say I only want it active for the next 2 months, for example. Or I don't want it to start being active until who knows when, beginning of the calendar year or the beginning of the academic year. In any case, we're not going to fill anything in there. Let's give it a certain, let's not give it any notes right now. Let's continue. You may have a client ID supplied by the vendor. I'm not going to fill in a client ID. If you do, the client ID is what will enable the actual access. And next, activate all. I could start selecting specific ones or upload an Excel file of the ones I do want to activate, but I'm saying activate all. Next, activate. So that's sending a job now in the background. And now that we already touched that, it's no longer in the unassigned, it's in the assigned to me. And when I'm all done and have nothing else to do here, I can say done, and then it's going. Oh, the resource is an unsuppressed bibliographic record. Please add a URL. Okay, so here what it's telling us is while each portfolio has a URL, there's not a URL on the level of the entire electronic collection. The entire electronic collection being this, so we can just put in any URL. Let's just go there and get any URL. Okay, so whether this is actually the one we want to use or not, for our purposes, we just want to put in a URL. So we'll come here, we'll edit the collection. And it's telling us that it wants a collection level URL. So we'll just say we're putting one in. And again, done. Okay, great. So now that one's gone. A job was sent to the background. Let's go to the monitor jobs. Nothing in the running. So if we go to the history, we see here that it ran. 14 records were processed, completed successfully. Let's take a look at the report. Yep, everything's good. 14 records processed. Here's our electronic collection. If we go and we search for this electronic collection now, you'll note that now the icon is blue. Previously it was gray, now it's blue, meaning it's active. If I click it from the institution, the icon of the people, meaning community zone, it brings me to the community zone. And then it shows an icon of a house, meaning I have it in my institution. Here's the icon of the house, meaning I have it in my institution and it's active in the institution. You may also recall that when we went to the monitor jobs, to the history, it said 14 records were processed. And when we look at the electronic collection, it says there are 13 portfolios, 13. So the 14 is the 13 portfolios plus the electronic collection itself. So everything was activated. Within 15 minutes of the time this is entered into Alma, it will already appear in Primo V. Let's go take a look at my Primo V and see what's going on there. So now we're popping into Primo V. Typically, institutions allow access after someone logs in. So we will log in as well. And now I'm logged in. And let's go take a look. Let's see if it's already here. If not, we'll start answering questions, start our next one, and then see. It is already here. Fantastic. So now I'm looking at it on the level of the electronic collection. We're also going to look soon for a portfolio within it. So now it's giving me this link here. Let's click that link. And it's bringing me to that URL that we put in on the electronic collection level URL. That's when somebody is searching on the level of the collection. However, typically, someone's looking for an actual portfolio in there. So let's do that as well. Oh, let me go back into Primo. Sorry about that. And let's look at for one of these portfolios. So I'm going to go to the portfolio list. And let's say now there's a user searching for the Memphis Daily Appeal. Oh, I see they're all Memphis. That's why it gave us that URL before from Memphis. Okay, so I'm going to let's take the Daily Memphis Avalanche. That sounds like an interesting one. Okay, so we will sign in. And we will search now for a portfolio inside that collection. I'm going to get all the questions soon. Available online. User comes and clicks available online. Here's my ProQuest historical newspapers. I happen to have it also in another electronic collection I see here. And that brings me right to the Memphis Daily Avalanche. Wonderful. So before I go to the questions, in sum, we searched for an electronic collection. We saw that we did not have it. First, we searched the institution zone. So then we searched the community. We saw that the community has it. We saw, let's even look in the PowerPoint. I made this wonderful PowerPoint and we're not even using it. So we searched the institution. We saw we didn't have it. We searched the community, saw it's in the community. We ordered it. We gave it electronic collection one time. We saw that it was purchased and book package. We left those defaults. We saw that it's by default not active. Then we gave it an activation note. We clicked order now. We ordered it, was sent. Then we saw the gray icon, meaning it wasn't activated. We saw the house icon in the community, also meaning it's not activated. We went to the electronic resource activation task list. And we went to the manage electronic resources, got to the resource here, and we saw the note, the activation note. We activated it. We checked everything that we want all new titles to automatically get activated. Then we went into Primo and we saw that we have access to it. Okay, let's go look at the questions. I'm going to go to the chat now. Okay, let's go to the bottom of the chat. Okay, could we see the show license feature in Primo? Yes, we can, but let's do that time permitting afterwards. And I will send out later in the document, in that file, in this one here, I will put a link to the document. I have a document on how to make the show license appear there, but I still want to show the subscription type. So let's leave that possibly until the end. The show license, why we see here the show license, here, sorry, here. Why and how we see the show license here. I'll put that on the official page of the series. So we don't use the time now. We might even have a session upcoming where we deal with licenses. That would actually be the appropriate place. This is our full session, and no, looks like we don't. Okay, so I will post it here for the ERM 102. Let's go to the other chats. Is there a way to search for a collection in the discovery system and let the discovery show all portfolios that are in the search collection, especially if the library is making an own collection? I'm not quite sure I follow. It sounds like you want to be able to search here by the name of the collection here and see all of the portfolios. You could go into your advanced search. You could configure your advanced search to search on the portfolio level and get all of the results. If I say title contain or keywords contain, let's say even this, and I will say title contains that, and I'll say all material types. You could play around here and eventually get it. It would depend on what you have set up here in your advanced search. I'm just going to search like that for now. ProQuest historical newspapers, the search. Let's go back here, library search. And this time I'm actually going to say library catalog and CDI. Okay, so now I'm getting parts of what's in it as well. You could do it with your advanced search and configure the advanced search different ways. In any case, once a user goes into here, though, he or she will get the details of the portfolio of the whole collection in any case. So I don't really see there being a need for that, but because now we're going right into, for example, the portfolio. But let's not get too close. Here I go, view on title list. Okay, so now I've got a list of those titles in there, but let's not go too far in there. Okay, the commercial appeal, the avalanche, the one we saw. Okay. Let's look at the other chats. We still want to look at the subscription type. Back to the chats. Is there an easy way to alter what it displays in Primo V? Let's not, I'm going to try to focus here strictly on ordering and activating electronic collections, not the Primo V configurations. Yes, you can change where it said book to something else. There are resource types that you can configure. But the answer is yes, you can, but we're not going to go into it now. What happens if you leave the bib marked as suppressed? Is it just a collection from Primo and not the individual titles? It's not going to get published. The collection and all of the contents will not get published. Okay, let's move on. Vendor reference number. Someone asks about the vendor reference number and says, sounds vaguely related to Edifact. Vendor reference number is when the vendor supplies to the institution information about material that's available from the vendor. That's the vendor reference number. It's an additional way for the vendor to be able to locate or identify what is being ordered. Okay, so now let's do an example here. We're exactly halfway done, which is good because now we're going to do a whole nother one, but this time we're going to use subscription. Now, you may recall that last time we spoke about order line types or purchase order line types. So let me just get out of here. And okay. So I'm just going to briefly go back to where we talked last time about purchase order line types. I'm clicking the purchase order line types link from the acquisitions menu from the configuration. And basically, there's more or less 4 types of orders. There's actually 6 if you want to include standing orders, and there's actually 8 if you want to include generic. But typically, or most popularly, an order is either for something physical or electronic, and then it's either continuous or one time. So for example here, in fact, if I take this whole table and I were to export this to Excel, you'll see, let's open this up, you'll see that it's either continuous or one time. If I look here, continuous or one time, there's also the standing order. So it's either continuous or one time, and then it's either electronic or physical. There's also digital, there's also generic. But generally speaking, it's physical or electronic. Let's even get just physical or electronic. And then it's either one time or continuous. So something you may have in your institution, for example, electronic book subscription, and you may have electronic collection subscription and electronic journal subscription. They all behave the same way. When I say behave the same way, for example, they will have renewal dates if they are continuous, and if they're one time, they won't have, for example. So we are now going to use an electronic of type continuous. Okay. And this time we're going to use the same example that we already have in here called an electronic collection called Entertainment Industry Magazine Archive Video Gaming. So let's come in here. Oops, sorry, wrong screen. Sorry about that. Here we are. So again, we're going to search for this via the institution and via the community. So, because we want to make sure we don't have it before we order it. So I'm searching in my institution, and I see I don't have it. It says no records were found. So we're going to switch now to the community. And let's search the community. Again, I could have just switched tabs in my search results. Instead, we're doing the actual search in the community. I see that this one has 30 portfolios, and we're going to order this one. Again, we could just activate it, but we're going to order. So let's say order. It's bringing me what I filled in last time, but we don't want one time now. We want subscription. So now we're doing electronic collection subscription. Again, we're not going to fill in the load from template because we want to show filling in the different parts of the purchase order line as part of our example. Okay. So this time it says journal package, if you notice. Before it said book package, now it says journal package. Acquisition method is by default purchase, which means we need a fund. And it's showing us the collection that we already ordered. By default, it's not active. We will choose our material supplier, and we'll choose our access provider. This time I'm going to make a different access provider. I'm going to use the Ahen Publishing as my access provider. Look at this. Now it's defaulting to expected activation 50 days after ordering. That's because if you recall, in fact, I'm going to go in a different browser to show you why that's happening. That's because we added to the vendor a default of 50 days for the activation date. Again, let's go into that vendor. Let's go into the ProQuest vendor that we're using now. What happened there? We went vendors. So because we put in here, this one here, in this account, here it is. Oh, sorry about that. We put this 50. Let me make this a little larger. We put 50 here. Expected activation after ordering, the default is 50. Because of that, It automatically gave us 50 days after ordering. That's the expected activation, and that's can be used later for retrieving all of those with expected activation date earlier than today and not yet activated, etc. Let's put in another note to the vendor. Excuse me, not a note to the vendor. We're going to put in later an activation note. Okay, we'll give it a price. This one will also be €1,000. Notice here it says enter price to select fund, where I'm moving my mouse under the net price. You can't add a fund until you add a price. So now I've added the price. Now I can click here to add a fund. We're going to use the same fund we used previously. And everything looks good so far. Let's say save. We'll skip the, let's give it a license, but we'll skip the reporting codes and the interested users. Now here's something we don't have yet, the renewal information. I'm just going to give it an activation note. May need to check proxy setup. Yofi. Great. Okay, so that's filled in, and now renewal types. When something is type subscription, the idea is that you'll need to renew it. It's possible to do the automated renewal where you give it a renewal date and it goes into a job and there's various parameters and it gets renewed. Or a manual renewal where you'll be able to see it. I'm going to go to my other browser here, where under the acquisitions, you'll have a link for the different types of renewals. So you'll be able to get them from here. Let's even come here. And under acquisitions, you'll be able to go right to the renew. And it'll give a list of everything that needs to be renewed according to dates. So that's the manual renewal, and then you can renew it from here. Assign it to someone, renew it yourself, etc. And you can see here it's waiting for manual renewal according to the renewal date. So let's come back now to our purchase order line. We're going to leave it manual renewal. We'll give it a subscription date. Let's say it's going to be a subscription from September 1st, 2023 to end of August 2024. So we'll say to August 31st, 2024. Renewal date. Renewal date is typically before it actually ends. We'll say, for example, here that we want this on 01/08, 2024, all ready to do the renewal. And that should cover it. Let's now do the order now like we did before. Okay, it's missing reporting codes, fine, and we're sending this off. This is purchase order line 46317, and save. So now we've ordered this one, Entertainment Industry Magazine Archive, video gaming. It's been ordered. Let me go look at the chats for a moment here. So we got a nice amount of participants. We got 174 participants. Very nice. And let's go look at the chats. I'm going to scroll down. We'll get the most recent chats and go backwards. So, chats. Hold on. Let me reshare here. Somehow we're no longer sharing. Okay. And chat. So, let's see what we got here. Could you elaborate on the renewal period field? Yes. So, this purchase order line, I gave it a renewal of August 1st, 2024. That's the time, the renewal, when I need to start the renewal process. So that's the time that I'm giving myself to do the renewal process. And I can always get all of those that need to be renewed in the acquisitions right here, and the acquisitions and under renew. I could actually go to the purchase order line list and then make my own facet, but here I can come to renew. And according to that date, it's giving me all of the ones that need renewal. For example, I could do this by vendor, by purchase type. For example, I want only those with electronic collection subscription, I'll say. Only want electronic collection subscription, and let's say I only want it for ProQuest LLC, and that should be enough. I could also do it by the acquisition method, the reporting codes, which I don't have, or even the renewal date. Say only those that are earlier than today, for example, but I'm going to say apply. So now I've got all of those that need to be renewed. And then I could come in here and start the renewal process. That's the renewal period. Someone asks, in relation to the expected activation days, is that simply how many days we think it will take for us to activate it after ordering, as it seems like most of the collection is ready for activation almost immediately? It's the time that you think the vendor is going to make this available for you to activate. It's parallel to the expected arrival date when we talk about physical inventory. If we were ordering now physical inventory, we would have a expected arrival date. When it's something electronic, we have the expected activation date. And how many days after ordering do I expect that the vendor will make this available? Someone states, I haven't understood quite right the difference between activate and order. Okay, so we will go in depth on that. The difference between the activate and the order. The order is the actual order line that I am sending to the vendor, the request to a vendor that I want to order this, meaning I'll have to pay for it, and that vendor needs to supply me with access to it. Here's my order. This is the order. It's how much does it cost, who is the vendor, etc. The activation is so that it will appear in my discovery, in that a user will be able to click on it and access the material. That's the activation part. That's a very important part of this session. So if that is not clear, I'm going to look at the chat right now. And person who sent in that question, if it's still not clear, let me know, because that's a very important part of what we're discussing now. So feel free to say it's still not clear, and let's continue. I wish I could answer and demo every single question here, but we want to make sure we cover at least what we're intended to cover here. Someone asked, why do we add a price in the purchase order line? Isn't that determined by the seller? Yes, it's determined by the seller, but we put it in the purchase order line because if you want to follow your funds and know when your funds are getting expended and when they're almost done, and you may want to use cost per use in the Alma analytics, if you want to track your spending in Alma, you need to add the price in the purchase order line. Okay, so now we've sent this order, and it's not yet active. It exists, but it's not yet active. So if we were to search now for an electronic collection, and now I'm searching the same way, but this time in the community zone, now again, we have that icon, meaning I have this in my institution and it's not active. It's gray. That's how I know it's not active. I have the order for it. And I see here when I'm in the institution that I have the icon of the people, meaning it's linked to the community zone. We're also going to have this now in the electronic resource activation task list. Last time we went to the electronic resource activation task list from here, from the resources into manage electronic resource activation. Now we're going to do that a little different. We're going to go this time from the task list. So now we're going to say task list. And now we're going to go to electronic resources activations unassigned, because as soon as it gets ordered, it's unassigned. And then when someone touches it, it gets assigned to that person. So here we are, Entertainment Industry Magazine Archive. This is ours. We could start editing the resource, testing access, etc. I'm just going to click activate. If there's an error message, it will tell me. Like last time it said there was no electronic collection level URL, and we added our own URL. So now we're not going to mark this as suppressed. And we're not going to say we subscribe to only some titles in the collection. We're going to say activate the service, which is full text, make it available, automatically activate new portfolios. So anytime a new portfolio will be added by the vendor to this electronic collection, we will automatically get those activated. Next. We're not going to do a client ID. Sometimes there will be a client ID, which is provided by the vendor for the institution to get access. I'm going to say activate all portfolios. And let's send that job. So now the job is sent. And I'm just going to go back to the chat because I see there was a follow-up question on the one that I said was an important question. So the question about what is the difference, why do we put in the price in the purchase order line? So if someone asks, follows up, thanks for the answer. If we add 1,000 euro, does that mean the seller vendor will have unlimited access to the entire fund or just part of it? Thanks. No. When you put in a price in the purchase order line, that does not give the vendor unlimited access to your fund. You pay the vendor with a invoice by creating an invoice in Alma or having it automatically get created. When you fill in the price in the purchase order line, that does not give the vendor access to your fund. Okay, let's go on. So that should have sent a job now that running the activation process. The task will be now in the Assign to Me tab. And I will now say done. I'm about to complete activation. Fine. Okay. And it again said it doesn't have an electronic collection level URL. And let's continue here. Someone's still asking about the renewal. So I will point also, in addition to what we're discussing here, I will point also, let me just get rid of this thing. Hold on a minute. I've got an extra. If we say renew, purchase order line, Alma, Ex Libris, renewal days, just so people are already aware that these can also be searched here. So everything, what I showed there before with the renew, you've got it all also in here. And we had talked about the renewal days. So we've got renewal reminder period is the days, renewal reminder period days. For manual renewals, we did the manual renewal, number of days before the renewal date that the operator wants to be reminded. And those appear, we said, in the acquisitions purchase order lines renew. That's where we went. And that will make a task list on the 5th of May. So that's the number of days where you will get the reminder. There's task list here. You can say this can be retrieved by different numbers of days. And there's also a task here for the renewal, which will be based on the days, whether you'll have the renewal or not here in your tasks. Here, this is a task, the order line renewal that gets automatically created based on those renewal reminder days. But I want to try to focus on Like I said, I wish I could show everything in an hour, but I want to make sure we at least cover what we intended to cover. So now a job was sent. When we went to the admin monitor jobs, we'll see the job. And this is the one now that was sent 31. That means there's 30 portfolios plus it looked at the collection. And where is our collection? Sorry about that. Let's go into our collection here. We will have now a blue icon. It's been activated. And here's our house icon. And let's go into Primo for a moment. And let's log into Primo. I'm actually going to stop sharing for one moment while I log into Primo, because I just want to make sure when I log in with this user that something will not appear. Okay, now we will share again. I'm logged in. Okay. So now I'm logged into Primo, and the portfolios which are in here should now appear in Primo. Actually, they might not yet. It takes up to 15 minutes. Last time it was pretty quick. We'll assume this time it'll be quick as well. So these are the ones that's in here. Let's take, for example, Insight Video Gaming. Insight Video Gaming. So let's go search for that. There we are. This is not ours yet. So ours is not yet in there. It takes a bit, as we stated. Let's look on the collection level to see if our collection's in there. So I will say cancel here. And here we are, entertainment industry. Let's actually go into the institution side of things. And if we take this, we're going to search on the collection level now, like we did last time as well. It is here. It hasn't yet gone through the whole activation process. We've got to give it up to 15 minutes. Fortunately, the first one was activated right away. By the way, you can also check within here the activation. From within Alma, you can also do the view. And from here, view the full text service. And we'll see in a moment, we can check this as well. I'm going to go back to the electronic collection in here. There we are. While we're waiting for this to get activated in the discovery, someone asked earlier, let me go in here, open up the chat. Someone asked earlier how to deactivate a collection. Let me get his or her exact wording. Okay, how can we deactivate the collection? So if we edit this collection, I'm going to click edit collection here. I'm in the institution, of course. I can't edit a collection if I was in the community zone. And here, activation date. The easiest way, or depending on your use case, but if you don't want this to be active, for example, right now, you could make this be a future date, and then you won't have it. Another way is to come to the additional tab And this is the actual service. This is the full text that's giving it access. From here, you could deactivate. So again, you edit the collection. Let's go back. Edit the collection. From the general, you could change the dates that it is active, and you could go to the service here in the additional tab and deactivate it. And by the way, you could get directly to the service here. Instead of going to edit collection and then to additional, you could come right here to the edit service. And that'll bring you right to the service. Instead of edit collection, it'll go right to the edit the service. And then you could just say not available, which would be like deactivating. Okay, let's take a look now what's going on with our portfolios. So I'm in the institution, I'm in the portfolio list. And let's take, for example, Game Players Nintendo Saga. Oh, Nintendo Sega, excuse me. Let's even display and discovery like this. So here it is, available online. And here it is. I'm going to click there. And then I get into wherever I need to be logged in here. I can actually log in a moment. I'm going to stop sharing for one moment, please, just so I can get access to that. And then I'm going to answer the question that someone brought up there about accessing this, because I happen to have a way to log in there. Okay. And we're in. Okay, so now I'm going to share again. Share content screen. Okay, so now I'm sharing again. User comes in, finds what he's looking for. Game Players Nintendo, goes to Advanced Online, clicks the link, and accesses the resource. Now let me go back into the chats. I see more chats came in. We have another 3 minutes. We should be able to answer some more chats. Sorry, I'm not able to get to every chat. Does the display in the discovery reflect the Primo, as I found that sometimes using display in discovery produces results, but items don't show out on our library catalog? The display in discovery that I did here, this is not related specifically to what we're talking about here, but when I do any search in Alma and I click display in discovery, it shows this record in discovery as if I had done a search for it in Primo V. It goes in there. In fact, when we click it, we can see exactly what it does. Inside here, if you want to start looking through the URL, so here it is. It looked, that's the MMS ID. It basically did a search for the MMS ID and displays it. That's what the display in the discovery does. It's a easy way to find out how does a record appear in discovery without needing to go search for it in discovery. Okay, let's go back to the chats and see what else we got. Okay. So someone says, okay, thanks. Someone says thank you. Someone says, I don't understand the reason to deactivate. Someone asked the question, how can we deactivate? That's why I showed how to deactivate. Someone says, what would be the benefit to deactivate a collection? A person who asked the question, how can we deactivate? Maybe you want to share with the audience why you would want to deactivate. It might be that the institution no longer has access to it, or they're in middle of getting access to it, so they don't want it to display in discovery. When something is not activated, it by default won't display in discovery. So that could be a reason. They don't want to get rid of it entirely because later on they will want to activate it. So they're just deactivating it. Someone says, I don't understand why you need to log into Primo to access some of the resources. Only certain vendors' practices. It does not seem to make a difference on our Primo system. I was logging into Primo and showing the access. I got to stop here. We're into the session. I was using Primo as a way to show access to the resource like we have now on the screen, just to emulate the real situation of what happens in an institution where typically the resources are accessed via Primo. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us. We hope to see you in the next session. Everything is on this page here, the page we have for the webinar series that we showed at the beginning and sent out the link. So we'll see everybody soon and have a nice day. The recording will be posted on the page. Thanks everybody and bye-bye.